Hello and welcome. I am Hmphrey Hawksley, your host for the next hour on this Friday Goldster Inside Story, where we are going to go into one of the most fascinating stories of all time, certainly among those we've had on the show. And welcome to our Goldster podcast listeners who are going to be picking up our stimulating conversation a little later. Now, many of you are of the generation that remembers the Cold War. At school, we were told to hide under our desks in case the Russians attacked, and there was a warning of Reds under the bed. That is, communist Soviet agents infiltrating our comfortable lives in order basically to destroy our society. Well, that mild-mannered, not so young Goldster guest waiting patiently next to me, what do I say? He was once a Red under the bed. He was a sleeper spy, working for the KGB, living a family life in America, while all the time sending informations back to the Soviet Union. His book is Deep Undercover, My Secret Life and Tangled Allegiances as a KGB Spy in America. Well, that spells it out. He had an austere but stable childhood in the 1950s in a backward corner of East Germany, where summer camps were fun, but the Bible was forbidden. This was communism. He's a very bright young man. He began his career as a university chemistry and maths teacher. Then he was recruited by the KGB. This is all true. What happened next? We will soon find out. Some of you may have seen the Netflix or Amazon series, I can't remember which, called The Americans, a fictional account of sleeper spies in America. Well, on Goldster, we're going to bring you the real deal. So without further ado, welcome Jack Barsky to Goldster Inside Story.
Well, thank you. This was the best introduction I've ever gotten. So if the rest of this show will go like this, it's going to be really, really great.
Well, you were Red under the bed?
Yes. But, you know, I'm 6'3", and I'm physically it would be hard for me to hide. As a matter of fact, the KGB actually had some doubts about my height, because we were supposed to just like blend in and not, you know, when you walk into a room, you're not going to be recognized. People won't say, "Oh, well, who is this?" But then I was so talented with regard to the spycraft. They said, "Okay, man, the Americans are taller anyway than the Russians," so they sent me anyway.
So you're 6'3", so you could have joined a basketball team and become a champion there.
Well, I was playing basketball in East Germany. I was on the first team at the university, and when I went to Berlin, I joined a team that was number 5 in East Germany. But I tell you what, we probably would have lost games against the best high school teams in the United States, because we weren't that good.
That's fast, because you went through all that, and we're going to go into that in detail. You grew up in East Germany and then saw or uncovered what the West was really like.
Yep.
But before we get into that story, Jack, I have to ask, because there's a lot of talk now of a new Cold War, which is people of our generation are thinking, oh my God, we've got to stop that happening. But what's your message for that younger generation of Russians, say Chinese, Belarusians, people that we're beginning to see as our enemies, that are being recruited and trained as you were?
Yeah, the message is really be your own self. Do not define yourself based on what you're being taught, based on the ideology, because ideology will lead you the wrong way, no matter what it is. You need to look into yourself and figure out what you would want, what you like, and the biggest word that I have to share with the entire world, it's four letters, LOVE, love. Do not hate. Don't hate yourself. Don't hate others, because that will fundamentally result in self-destruction or destruction of others.
That's that. So, because when I was growing up, and I think a lot of our audience, and please tell us of your thoughts about all this as we talk through this, because I was a child during the Cold War. I think hate's not the right word, but we were taught to be very afraid, and that the Russians were our enemies. Were you taught the same thing when you were growing up in East Germany?
Well, I wasn't. To me, the Russians weren't the
No,
enemy.
not the Russians, but the West were the
yes, it was the
Americans?
West, the Americans. We were absolutely. I was 100% sure that when I was launched to the United States, that I was in enemy territory. I was 100% sure that the United States was supporting West Germany, which. And that's a proven fact. It's a historic fact. In West Germany, there were some ex-Nazis in the government, and so I knew that West Germany was reviving fascism, and the United States was supporting that. All wrong. There were some aspects to that lie that were the truth, but the truth was far from what we were taught. And what the other thing that happened was that the history of the Soviet Union, the history of communism, was taught in a way that it wasn't true. There was just we were reading the writings of Vladimir Lenin, the fellow who founded the Soviet Union. They were redacted. There was some stuff in there that we didn't get to read. So there was a lot of brainwashing. So the bottom line is, whatever you're getting from a government or from a powerful institution, you need to find a way to really verify to the extent you can whether they are telling you the truth.
That's because you mentioned at one part of the book, which stuck in my mind. You said, having been born 4 years and 10 days after Germany's unconditional surrender in World War II, my life's trajectory has its roots firmly planted in that war and its results. The results being that if you had lived in another part of Germany, you would have grown up with a completely different story.
Absolutely, 100% true. And I grew up in the part of Germany that was occupied by the Russians, and that eventually, very quickly, was ruled by German communists. And so, I grew up getting nothing but, fed ideology from kindergarten on to the elementary school, high school, university. There was nothing. There was no competing ideas that we were exposed to. So when you get, and this is the dangers of ideology. When you are being fed ideology, whatever it is, from kindergarten on, that's what you believe in. You don't know anything else. So I'm telling people that if you hear that, for instance, the moon is made out of cheese, and you hear it again and again and again, it becomes a fundamental part of your fundamental beliefs that there's cheese that could be harvested from the moon.
Yeah. And so, and you tell, I think maybe this was when you got a glimpse of something different, that you found that you were banned from going to a Bible class as a kid, and then your father said you couldn't go.
Yes.
And then you saw a copy on your grandfather's bookshelf.
I did, and I because I was always a curious, and still am a curious fellow. So I opened this thing and I started reading it. Except the one thing a newcomer should not read the way the Bible is structured. It's from the beginning. Because at page 7, 8, 9, 10, you had this genealogy. So who begat whom?
Yes.
For pages and pages, and that got boring. And the way you read the Bible, you should start with the New Testament with the story of Jesus. But I didn't know that, so I put it away, and that was the end of that.
Yeah, but did that make you realize for the first time that there was interesting stuff out there that wasn't the moon was made of cheese, as you say?
Not really, not at that point. And you know, when I realized that the hardcore communist ideology was not 100% correct, was, you know, I spent several years in the United States, and it happened. And at that time, the socialist parties in Western Europe, uh, uh, they adopted some kind of a theory which was called conversion theory, which meant that capitalism and communism would eventually converge in some kind of socialism, like a welfare state, which we have now in the West anyway.
Yeah.
And I sort of like that, because I knew, having lived in the US for many years, that life in the US was much, much, much better in terms of, you know, your fundamental needs and the ability to get stuff and the ability to live better. But I still believed in the, you know, in the goodness of central government to distribute the wealth. And interestingly enough, it was my last visit back to Moscow. I was picked up by a low-level KGB guy, and as we were going from the airport towards the place where I was going to stay for a while, he volunteered that the convergence theory, not me, I had nothing to do with this. He said that was probably where we were going. That was during when Gorbachev was in charge.
Okay, the glasnost and perestroika were just beginning.
Yes. And the fun of the one more thing here, this guy wasn't high enough up in the hierarchy of the KGB to have come up with this idea. He got this from upstairs.
And can we go back to, can you describe to us briefly your family structure, your mother and father, and what they were all doing?
Yeah, I grew up in a small village, maybe had about 2,000 people who lived there. My parents were both teachers. They met in a, right after World War II, in East Germany, all the teachers that had any kind of a connection with the Nazi Party were dismissed. And so they trained a bunch of new teachers, and my parents met in that kind of a setting. I also had a younger brother who was 3 years younger than me, grew up, as I said, in a village. And, you know, as compared to people my age who lived in cities, I actually had a really, really nice upbringing in terms of, we lived in a house. Mm-hmm. We had food. It wasn't a lot of good food, but at least I cannot remember having been hungry ever. The food was not tasting good, but... And
this was just after the end of the war, so here
I was born in 49. Yes, yeah. 1949. Yeah, there was a lot of food that was rationed, but you could always get potatoes from the local farmer. So I cannot remember having been hungry. I also cannot remember having eaten a really good tasting meal until like I was maybe 10, 12 years old.
Okay, what did you do? A local pizza?
No, pizza, we didn't have pizza. No, what pizza? Well, what is that?
So you had this stable upbringing. And anybody in our audience who are listening here, give us your Cold War experiences over here at that time. 49, early 50s, and
okay. Then... So the one experience that really stands out in my memory. My father was the principal of the middle school. And that was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were sitting there, and I don't know what class, what was being taught. My father came in and told all of us that this was a very, very dangerous situation, and just warned us that, the world could explode. There was not instructions like to hide under the desk or anything like that, but that sticks in my mind. I forgot when that was. Was it 61, the Cuban Missile Crisis?
62. It was November 62,
Okay.
I think. Wasn't it? Yes.
I was 13 years old. I was in seventh grade.
Yeah.
And the other experience I had was when the wall was erected. My father was one of the first people in the village, I think the first, who had a car. So we had a vacation trip to the what is the Baltic Sea? Is that what it's called? And on the way back, we were going to visit Berlin, specifically West Berlin, because we knew that they had some stuff that we could buy that I needed, like a nice pair of pants or whatever. So as we are driving down, it was the 13th of August, 61. We couldn't get into Berlin.
Because the wall was coming. The wall was being blocked.
It was blocked, and there were, there's a traffic jam, and then armed guards came over and said, "You can't get into Berlin." And we said, "Why?" "Well, we're not going to tell you. Go home." So by the time we got home, we finally turned on the radio, and we heard that the anti-fascist wall of protection had been erected. It's amazing that I experienced that moment in time personally, and we all knew this was the right thing to do, because the damn Nazis from West Germany were just about to come over and occupy us, and kill all the communists and so forth. So these are the two memories that I have of
talking about those damn Nazis. Angie asks the question here, talking about the convergence you're talking about. How comfortable were you about this convergence between former Nazis still living in GDR but following the extreme ideology of communism, Marxism, Leninism? Did you? It
wasn't the former Nazis. It was the capitalist system, which I knew at the time was working a whole lot better than the centrally organized communist economy, because any hierarchy that's really, really big winds up to be very inefficient. And I had a good taste of what it's like to work in this economy. Most people who could didn't work; they got paid anyway.
Yeah.
So, but I knew that, and the result of that was very much substandard, and so the whole idea was to combine the goodness of the communist idea with the goodness of the capitalist system that made life better for everybody.
So we've got a picture now of your upbringing. Take us to your being recruited and being sent to America. I mean, how did that work?
And nobody could. It's not like in the United States, if you want to join the CIA, you just call a phone number, or you send an email, and then they get in touch with you. No, the KGB. There was no way there was no office in East Germany that had on the door saying KGB, and come on in, we're welcome. No, they recruited, and this. I'm reconstructing this. I don't know this for a fact, but I guarantee you that in those days, East Germany, the secret police, the Stasi, kept records of every citizen. And I'm pretty sure they granted the KGB access to those records, and they were searching for people who fit a certain a profile. Fundamentally, to begin with, mostly very, very bright, and secondly, active in the communist youth movement in the East German Communist Party, and I fit that profile very well. So one day, it was on a Saturday. I was sitting in my dorm room. They knew that my roommate wasn't there. They knew which door to knock on, and I realized that later that how did they know it? Because the room next to me, there was a guest student from the Soviet Union. I guarantee, and you know, he befriended me. I guarantee you, he tipped them off. So on a Saturday, I got a knock on the door, and I say, hello, you know, come on in. And in walked the short German national who had the most idiotic cover story for meeting me. I mean, the guy was a total idiot, and he was the worst KGB affiliated individual I ever met.
Did it put you off?
Well, he introduced himself. He says, "I'm from Carl Zeiss Jena." That was the company that made the biggest company in that city that made high quality optical instruments that were actually selling all over the world. And he said, "I'm from Carl Zeiss Jena. I would like to talk to you about you know, your plans after you graduate." And that was so damn stupid, because in those days, companies did not recruit at a university. You were assigned, unless you were in the top like 5%, then you could stay and get your doctorate. And that was my path anyway. So immediately when he came up with that stupid lie, I knew that he wasn't real. I thought he was, you know, East German secret police, because he was German, Stasi. And so I'm just playing along with him. And eventually he, after about like 15, 20 minutes of small talk, he said, "You know what, I really got to come clean here. I'm not from Carl Zeiss Jena, I'm from the government." He said, could you see yourself one day working for the government? You know, in my mind, I was thinking to like really make him uncomfortable and ask him for what part of the government, but I didn't, because I already knew in my mind, I knew this was about espionage. It was about something interesting. And I said, yeah, but not, I said, yes, I could, but not as a chemist. So here's the thing, we were speaking, we were talking between the lines. He got it, the answer to the question he didn't ask. So we made arrangements to meet again at a local restaurant, the #1 restaurant, and I still know what I had to eat. It was a grandiose, wonderful meal for which I didn't have to pay. But at that point, he introduced me to a fellow. He said, "I would like you to meet Herman." And then he said, we are working with our Soviet friends. And then he disappeared. And Herman became my new friend. And he was KGB, because I knew he was Russian. And at that point, I knew that I had been introduced to the KGB, which was a great honor for me, because I knew that the KGB was the most wonderful force in the history of man. And the KGB was, this is what we were taught, you know. The KGB had a history of fighting the Nazis and the capitalists, and were at the forefront to help, you know, create the paradise for the workers on the entire planet. Yay, here I am, and I felt really flattered. And for the next year and a half, I had a relationship. It was informal with Herman, and I was not aware that he was just like checking me out A to Z to see if I had it, what it would take to become one of their elite agents. And that happened. And I'm going to stop right here if you want to ask some more questions, how I got actually recruited.
Yeah, no, that was the recruitment. It's a sort of follow-on question then, and then how and when did they tell you to become an American citizen and
Okay.
go
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let me just go on here. So after about roughly 18 months, Herman told me, Berlin wants to meet me. So they sent me to Berlin for 3 weeks with some kind of an official explanation to, I was already at that point an assistant professor at the university, but there was some kind of a party requisition, he has to go there, blah, blah, blah. 3 weeks. And there, by the way, when I got there, I had my first secret meeting. I had a place and a time and a code phrase to introduce myself. I didn't know what the person who I was going to meet looked like, and so I met my contact person for 3 weeks, and him and I met frequently. He gave me some West German news magazines to read, which was of course illegal in East Germany in those days. That made me feel special. And he gave me a couple of little tasks to act as if I was an agent in Berlin to figure something out. For instance, he said, "Here's a building, find out who's in there and what they're doing there," and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the 3 weeks, he, without telling me what this was all about, he took me to Karlshorst, which was the headquarters of the Soviet army and the KGB in East Germany. And I got to meet who I think was the head of the KGB in East Germany. So we walked into the office there, and there was this short guy who spoke neither German nor English. He started talking. The moment he opened his mouth, he said, "Oh my God, this guy, oh, whoa." Very, very strong psychologically. There was a lot of psychological energy coming out of this guy. And, after some bullshit, propaganda, why the KGB, we're doing what we're doing, he just threw that question at me, which I was not prepared for at all. He said, "So what, are you in or not?" I said, "What do you mean? I'm not trained." He said, "Well, don't worry about it. We're going to train you. But we like to work with people who can make decisions rather quickly. I give you until noon tomorrow to say yes or no." At that point, people ask me, was it possible to say no? Yes, it was, because I wasn't in yet. And I could have said, I don't think I can do this, I can handle this, because I already knew what this would imply. I was already prepared to become an illegal in West Germany, mind you, not in the United States.
Not in the US, but even so, it's in
yes. Obviously, going over to West Germany would have meant a lot of things. Saying goodbye to my family, saying goodbye to my basketball team, saying goodbye to my wonderful career in East Germany. Because
we have a question here on what would have happened if you had refused. You could refuse, but would you have kept your status and your job and everything, or would you have a black mark?
I believe so. At that point, I wasn't in yet. But once you're in, and then you say, "I can't handle this," you got a problem. Because I once met a high school classmate of mine who was in with the Stasi, East German secret police. And when they sent him on a practice trips to West Berlin, and he came back and he said, "I can't handle this. I can't do this." He never ever had a career in what he was trained to be as an engineer. He had to make do for his entire life. Eventually, he established a little small business selling model railroads. Okay, so he trains. Yeah. So I pretty much know that if I had said no at that point, they would have let me go. Once you're in and you say no, you're in trouble.
You went back and said you were in. You
No,
couldn't
I
do
said
it.
after a sleepless night. I mean, I went this way, that way, this way, that way. You know what made me say yes was two things. My what they were really looking for, my well-controlled inclination for adventure and risk taking. I wanted to go to the West, and this was my path to go to Paris, to go to New York, to you just see the world. And the other thing is, it was very flattering to be invited by the KGB to be one of their special agents. So eventually, that made me say yes.
A quick interrupting, Chris, because Angie asked to this. In your decision making there, do you think, were you following your heart or your head, ideology or opportunity?
My gut.
Your gut.
I made a lot of decisions in my life that didn't come from the head. That when you have life-changing decisions to make, you can make two columns, the pros and the cons. And when you add it all up, it's a tie. And then you go with your gut.
Yeah.
So I went with my gut, and I also went with my gut later on when I decided to quit the KGB.
Good decision.
Another story.
Did your gut tell you the right decision then?
Well, yes. And, looking back, I'm here in the United States, and I've lived a very, very interesting life. And I'm so happy that I'm here, because if I had stayed in East Germany, I might have wound up in the party hierarchy because they were trying to recruit me. I might have wound up in the East German government, and I might have then had the same experience as some of my high school and college friends had. That when the wall came down, their life fell apart.
Okay.
And I'm here, and I'm healthy, and I know who I am. And I've had a good life, and I still am having a good life. I'm so happy that I wound up in the United States.
We have to fast forward, actually, because we've only got half an hour left. This is this is totally fascinating. But you get to the US. Tell us very briefly how you got there, and then what you did when you were in America.
Okay, so when they launched me, I had a bunch of cash on me and a birth certificate for a young person, a young male who died at the age of 11. Some KGB agent managed to acquire that. It was a genuine birth certificate copy, and so it was a 3-week trip, zigzag, with 3 passports, and to just make sure that nobody could trace me back to the Soviet Union. And sometime in the early fall of 1978, I entered the United States through O'Hare Airport. I'm not going to talk about what happened then. Eventually, I wound up in New York City. And the immediate task was for me to take that birth certificate and acquire the documentation that you need to live and work in the United States. That took me about a year, because the instructions that I got in Moscow were wrong.
Was the birth certificate Jack Barsky?
Yes.
So you are we are
Yes.
talking not to what and what's your real name?
You don't want to hear that, because no English speaker can really pronounce this. As a matter of fact,
anyway.
my daughter, who was born in this country, changed her last name to my German name, and she can't pronounce it. So I'm gonna give it to you slowly. Albrecht Dittrich. Try that.
And anybody can pronounce that who's listening in. Put it in the chat, and Jack will tell us whether it's right or not. And okay, so you were trying to get your equivalent to a green card to stay in the US, and then what happened?
Well, again, so I stayed 1 year in one of those hotels where you pay by the month, and it was a pretty cheap hotel, and I had to find a way to get a New York driver's license, and very important, a social security card. Now, in those days, you could get a social security card as an adult, because right now, if you were born in the United States, and that was my cover, I was born in Orange, New Jersey, based on my birth certificate. In those days, you could get a social security card because there were a couple of exceptions where you didn't need a social security card. You were not subject to social security, and there were people who worked, farm workers, peasants, and people who work for religious institutions. So we had as a cover story that I spent a number of years working on a farm. So I eventually, after a year, I had my social security card, I had my driver's license, I could get my first job. Now, mind you, here was a fellow with a master's degree in chemistry and already teaching at university. My first job in New York was bike messenger, because I didn't have a resume. I couldn't possibly apply for a job as a professional. So I spent 2.5 years working as a bike messenger, and then I went back to college. I went to college and got a degree in information technology, and eventually wound up, as a programmer for an insurance company. That is when I finally, and it took 5 years. I finally entered American society as a functioning member. It took a long time, and it took a lot of me improvising. The KGB could not have possibly given me really good instructions to go from here to there. But go ahead.
So it took 5 years to enter American society, as you so succinctly put it, but your real job would have been to sort of send really hot secrets back to Russia, but you weren't in a position to do that, were you?
No, this is in hindsight that it really wasn't. And I take this from interviews that were given by ex-heads of I keep on saying department, but it's not department, but the Directorate S, which was under the first Directorate. Directorate S in the KGB was illegals. And I don't know whether they had illegals in other countries. I just know that, I was one of 10 that they sent to the United States. And what these folks indicated in their interviews, that the most important aspect of my being in the United States was my being in the United States, because during the height of the Cold War, there was a good possibility that all the diplomats would be kicked out, the Soviet diplomats, and the only people left over on the other side of the enemy line was us. Okay, so that was key for them. Now, they also gave me some tasks, but they were secondary. And I have a friend of mine who worked counterintelligence in the FBI, and he knows the history of some of the other illegals. And he said, I was the only one who actually was giving tasks. Everybody else was just here to just hang out.
So you were given specific tasks to what, steal specific secrets?
It was very fuzzy. They said, make contacts, particularly with folks who are decision makers in foreign policy, or at least are influencers. Now that was a tall task to get into, because even as a programmer, I didn't know how. They were fundamentally, they were giving me some targets, particularly conservative think tanks, like I forgot. There's a couple of them that still exist, but also
like the Heritage Foundation or Brookings or CSI, and those sort of people, yeah.
And they focused me on Columbia University, because Columbia had a department I don't know what it was called, but it was about international relations that was headed by Zbigniew Brzezinski. And Brzezinski was the national security advisor for President Carter at the time, and they wanted me to like make connections with that department. I had no real good reason to be there, and I didn't have the time either. So I failed in that respect, and I thought I was a real big failure, when in fact, the fact that I lived in the US undetected for many years was a huge success in their mind, because they granted me the second highest decoration of the Soviet Union, I forgot what that's called, but
sort of medal they gave Kim Philby, was it? Because they gave
pretty
him
much,
a medal, didn't they?
pretty
Yeah.
much. The Order of the Red Banner, which was the highest, was Hero of the Soviet Union. I didn't quite measure up to get that, but that was pretty. They were very, very happy with me.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Jack, tell us about your families, because you had a wife and family in East Germany and a
Yes,
wife and family in America, didn't you?
Yes. So I fell in love with a woman in East Germany, and by the time that I was considered a very valuable asset because of my ability to speak English with almost no accent, which is very, very rare. If you learn another language, and I started in the mid-20s, it's almost impossible to get rid of your native accent, because you know what, the way you make sounds, there are some anatomic features in your mouth.
Angie has a question about the language. Did you ever talk German in your sleep?
Very good question. I was afraid of doing that. Particularly, I was afraid of potentially having to be operated on, and you know, maybe say stuff in my sleep. I'm not aware of it. Occasionally, I slip. I sometimes say "ja" instead of "yes," but not really. Nobody ever caught me.
Okay. And did you instinctively respond to the name Albrecht? And Pauline has put it in the chat that your name was Albrecht Dietrich.
Oh, only when I went back to Germany after many years, and somebody says Albrecht, I would turn around and say yeah. But you know, my brain is there's a dichotomy in there. There's a part of my brain that's English, and a part of my brain is German, and they're not very well connected. They're very much isolated. So, for instance, the book that I wrote was translated into German. I could not have done this. After, like, you know, I was on a book tour in Germany for 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, I was able to speak German fluently, but I still couldn't translate back and forth. So that's called severe compartmentalization.
So you were a Cold War successful in your boss's eyes,
yes,
the spy, and you would be there if all the diplomats got thrown out and things happened. And then
yes,
you have a message that you got from the KGB: prepare for urgent departure. We have reason to believe that your cover has been blown. You are in severe danger. Tell us that day and tell us what you did.
That was early winter in 1988. There was it started with a graphic sign. It was a big red dot that was on a pole on my way to work. They knew I had to tell them which way I was going to work, and I saw that dot, and that said, like, you got to get out of here. Beeline, go to the Canadian border, and you don't even think about it. Oh well, I wasn't ready, because at the time I had another marriage. I had a marriage in the United States. I married this woman who was very, very pretty, who I was dating, and at one point she told me that she was an illegal. So I said, okay, I can marry you. You can get your green card, and when you get your green card, we divorce. Well, it didn't work out that way because she got pregnant on purpose. I didn't realize that that's how women from the Caribbean, because that's where she was from, made sure that they could capture a male, a functioning male. So she gave birth to a baby girl, and I watched this girl grow up, and that is when the selfish nature of me gave way to the LOVE, love. I fell in love with this girl like I've never loved anybody in my entire life. She was so pretty. She was beautiful. She had the big eyes, and I just wanted to take care of her. And for me to run right back to the Soviet Union, it would have meant deserting the one person that I loved more than anybody else, and I couldn't do that. I just couldn't. So I decided to, first of all, I had indication that they were wrong, because I was really, really good in counterintelligence training. I was good at figuring out whether I was being watched or my apartment was being searched and stuff like that. There was no sign whatsoever, and I thought they were wrong. I didn't possibly know that they were wrong, but there was always a possibility that the FBI was on my case, but they weren't. I found out much later. So I eventually decided to quit the KGB. And people say, well, how do you quit the KGB? Well, I sent my goodbye letter, was in secret writing, by the way, said the following: I understand that I'm in danger, but I can't come home because I have contracted HIV/AIDS.
You made that up.
And that was the lie that they actually bought.
Okay.
They had no reason to believe that I would. They didn't know that I had a girl. They didn't know that I was married. They didn't check on me that way, because that was a no-no. If any one of those the diplomats who were actually KGB were going to check on me, that could have endangered me. So it was an absolute no-no. I figured this one out because when I graduated from college, I was valedictorian, and they didn't know about that either. So I knew that whatever I told them, they would believe, and they did. They went to my East German family and told them that I had passed away. So in the German Social Security Register, whatever that's called, Albrecht Dittrich is carried as passed away in 1988.
Oh God! And what about your family in East Germany?
Well, they thought I was dead. Okay, so and then many years later, when I was able to go back to Germany, and my son, who was an adult, my son found out about that I'm still alive because of my daughter, the one I stayed in the US for, because when I told her that she has a half brother in Germany, she was searching for him forever and found him eventually. And that's how we reconnected. Last time I met him, he was 5 years old, and then I met him. He came to the US, and we met. And he calls me dad now, and he understands the reasoning behind me staying here, because I know that he had a functioning mother, and he had a good family, supporting family structure. And if I had left Chelsea, that's my daughter's name, her mother had 4 years of schooling, she would have grown up in a very bad neighborhood, very poor. I managed to, raise her like a good middle-class father raises a daughter, and she's doing very well now, and I'm very proud of her.
That is an incredible story. Just so we've got some questions that I want to get to. So just in a few seconds, you gave yourself up to the American government, or they found you?
No, I did not. They found me. I was 9 years after I quit the KGB, the FBI actually said hello to me. They were made aware of my existence by a defector from, it was KGB, but when he defected the Russia was there was no more KGB. I think it was.
Oh, so they found your name in the files, did they?
No, he
Yeah.
fundamentally pointed out that there was a illegal living in the northeast of the United States by the name of Jack Barsky, and if he were still alive, I would thank him profusely for having betrayed me, because that gave me an opportunity to come clean, so to speak.
And so you were debriefed, I presume, by the American intelligence services, and then you became an American citizen.
That is correct. I cooperated fully. I had no reason not to cooperate. By the time they said hello, I had a family. I had in addition to my daughter, I had a son. I lived in the country in Pennsylvania with a nice house. I had a good career. I had no reason to ever want to go back to Russia, for sure, but also not Germany, because Germany was not my old country anymore. And I had lost fundamentally all my communist ideology. I found out that it was all fake, phony fraud. So
there's a question there from Patricia, actually, that links to that. How long was it before you decided the US was a good place to be? I mean, you had these competing ideologies and
let me tell you, when the wall came down in 1989, I started doing some research. In those days, the internet was already a good place to do research on, and I found out, what all the things that were wrong that we were taught. But when I committed to the United States was when I bought my first house. Okay, in the suburbs. A nice house. I own property, which is not something that that was possible in a communist society. And it was a nice house with a pool and a great backyard. And then we had my then wife and I had another childhood son. And that is when I became a committed American. However, when I became emotionally American was 9/11.
Oh, okay. That's a very interesting. Emma asks, in very quick snap answers, were there women too sent to spy on the West by the KGB? Did you have female colleagues?
I didn't have any colleagues. I was trained one-on-one. I never met one of my colleagues at all, period. I know that based on what came out of the KGB archives, there were 10 of us that they trained and possibly sent. I have no idea. I'm sure that they would have loved to have some females, because I believe that female agents in a male-dominated society can be much more effective than males. But females are.
We actually interviewed a couple of former CIA agents on this show a few weeks back from SpyX, which is your organization, and they said that the females could be much more effective as well. Patrick asked, did the KGB support your German family financially?
Yes, they did. My German wife did not have to go to work.
Oh, okay.
As a matter of fact, they paid me a salary in German currency, East German currency, and she was able to drive the best vehicle, the best car available in East Germany was it's called a Lada, which was actually an Italian, a copy of an Italian model, and she had a telephone. In those days, nobody had a telephone unless they worked for the government. So she was doing well financially. No,
she was doing well. A quick one, but quite a big question from Angie. All those lies and deceit that come with the territory that you worked in, any regrets? Would you have lived your life any differently?
Well, the only regret I have really is that I betrayed that woman that I really loved. But I had this binary choice: go back to Germany and join the family and spend the rest of my life with this beautiful, wonderful woman, or stay here and support this child.
Yeah.
And the child won. So
yes.
I morally, I'm whole even though I'm very sorry, and if I don't have a relationship with the German ex-wife. She doesn't want to have one. But this is one of the things when you drive into a one-way street and at the end there is no way to turn around, then you have to make a decision what to do. And I can't regret that decision because the child was more needy than the adult woman.
That's very clearly put. Jack, can you just wait there for a second? I'm going to tell our audience what is coming up. In fact, why don't you go and pick up the book that we can see behind you so we can show everybody what it is. I'm going to say that next Tuesday is our next show. That is The Deep Undercover by Jack Barsky, and I've put in a couple of times. That is the upside down and inside out version of it. I put in a couple of times the buy buttons from that. That you can get on Amazon, and we're also linking up with the Aldborough Bookshop, who we did yesterday. There's a link in that I'll put in a second. But next Tuesday, March 21st, we have a special live event at the Riverstone Theatre on the banks of the Thames, where my guest will be none other than my co-host Lucinda, on the struggle she had in researching her biography of Princess Louise, the sixth child of Victoria and Albert. It's also a chance to meet some of you, we hope, person to person at Riverstone. I'm not sure, I think it's fully booked, but we can always get you in or send to concierge at goldster.co.uk. I'm sure we can find a way in there. March 23rd, Lucinda is with Emma Burstall and her latest, The House on Rockaway Beach. The Rockaways are some miles of sandy beaches just within a stone's throw of Manhattan, but it's perfect for intrigue, mystery, and action. March 24th, Lucinda is with Annie Domingo, Breaking the Marford Chain, takes the reader back to the 19th century. Two sisters are captured and sold separately into slavery, and they end up in two different countries with opposite slavery laws. That will be absolutely fascinating. Jack, there's one thing, we've got a sort of big question from Emma about the amount of surveillance that there is here and the amount that everybody's into our lives. How is that different? Is that frightening, and how is it different from the time that you were training or were a spy?
Surveillance by whom?
By everybody.
Or you got to be aware that in some way there's information that's being gathered about you by your own government, but also by social media from foreign governments. TikTok is probably the worst culprit there.
Yes.
You just got to be really, really careful with sensitive information. For instance, I will never ever give password, put passwords in an email, put my bank account in an email, because it can be hacked. I would only give it on the phone, because no evil people will watch your phone line forever and ever, just in case something important comes up. So be very private, be very mindful of the critical information that you have, because your own government could be the enemy as well.
That's a great tip there from a highly trained KGB agent. KGB agent. And one last question for you, Jack. I think you told me you was a young 73 years old now. Goldster is for the 50 plus, so you're weighing on. But when you've had a life full of experiences like you, what do you do to sort of stay interested, get out of bed in the morning? Do you keep yourself fit? Do you do CrossFit?
Oh my God, you got to keep busy. I have right now. I'm involved in 4 initiatives that primarily are in the entertainment industry, but I'm also still out there doing public speaking. And it's a combination of making some money, but also giving the message that be very, very, very much afraid of attaching yourself to any kind of ideology. You will lose your individuality. you know, that could be anything. It could be, you know, left wing, it could be right wing, and it could be global warming.
Okay.
As long as keep thinking and reasoning and stay yourself. And what makes me get up in the morning? Well, I have a 12-year-old daughter who is very, very smart and very much like me, and I'm trying to collect the funds to get her to a good college.
Collectively brilliant. And what a great tip. Denise says, fascinating session. Thank you both. Sue Townley, thank you, Sue. Really enjoyed today's session. So fascinating. Jean Joyce, what an interesting life you've had and a great guest. And time's winged chariot is upon us, unfortunately. What a brilliant discussion you have given us, Jack. And thank you for the wonderful audience for probing, for asking and coming in there with us. Thank you also, podcast listeners, for being with us. And please send us your thoughts and comments on to concierge@goldster.co.uk and come and join the Goldster family. Until next week with our live hybrid streamed, or whatever we call it, from Riverstone Theatre and Lucinda. Stay involved, stay curious, stay alert for spies and reds under your bed, stay away from ideology, stay safe, and of course, stay Goldster. The great Jack Barsky, what a memorable guest you've been for us. Goodbye, Jack, and I hope to catch up with you in London.
And I'm going back to bed.
Cheers. Bye, everybody. Thank you.